I was terminated, I think is the technical legal word, but yes, terminated, and then agreed to the press release and the terms of the termination.
How soon after the last quarter, with the disappointing results, did this conversation start?
It didn't start at all until yesterday, and I'm not sure is actually related to the results, because internally we had a model and those results weren't materially off that in terms of the actual gross margin and things. We were building a bigger platform, rolling it out. So I don't think it's actually one quarter. And I imagine if people buy and sell the stock in one quarter, or fire or don't fire the CEO in one quarter, that's kind of not consistent with the sector.
So if not those results, what caused it?
Well, probably me. You know, when you're an entrepreneur, remember, I started this when it was considered one of the worst ideas in the history of business ideas. 2013, I could barely get people to give me any money, and most people who give me money probably shouldn't have, because they didn't have enough to actually share. You don't get to a $20 billion market cap, 4,000 people, and operating in 16 countries because you're super malleable on everybody's idea is a good idea. You actually have a view of how it should be done and you want to do it. And so with $5 billion coming in, we changed the board on November 1, and that changes the dynamic. And so I don't love this outcome, but it's not necessarily wrong for the company, and it's not totally unexpected when you change that structure of governance.
When you look back then, would you say that was a mistake to invite that big investor in?
Well, if I really just wanted to keep my job, you'd view it that way. But if you actually want to globally dominate a company, you do that deal all day long. So in the summer when we were contemplating the deal, certainly deal risk, you analyze as many things as you can think about. And one of the things that myself and a couple of Mark and others talked about is when the dynamic of the board changes, there's going to be the potential that management changes. But $5 billion for 17% of the company, so we can actually have cash in the bank, you know, almost 100 patents filed to us now, a couple hundred we're chasing, 60 clinical trials up and running or targeted to get going. You know, this is about creating a legend, and I think the $5 billion helped.
Well, of course, one of the reasons, Bruce, that people say Constellation was disappointed with the last quarter is because they said they were. Post the results, they made some kind of surprising remarks. Were you surprised by what they said?
I perceived them as potential foreshadowing, but I wasn't surprised.
Were you disappointed?
I wouldn't have said them.
You wouldn't have said them. And so did that speak to kind of a misunderstanding maybe about what you were trying to do at the company?
Or foreshadowing or laying down track. I wouldn't have said them.
And so in terms of the agreement that you've reached with them, you're still a big investor in Canopy, not CEO any longer, not on the board any longer. What's your thought about kind of being at arm's length from this thing that you created?
You know, the good news is getting older. If I was 27, I'd probably be pissed off and upset. I'm 52, and this isn't the first time I've been fired for being the entrepreneur after 5 or 6 years of creating value. My guess is the thing's going to do really well, and if it was totally dependent on me, it's probably screwed anyhow. So I think that this is a phenomenal company that's attracted and continues to attract. Like, you wouldn't believe who wants to work at Canopy now. Like, the most sought after job in Canada over the next foreseeable future will be the one that I just left. And so when they run the job search, their principal problem is going to be software to support sorting all those applications, because this is going to be who would not want that job? The fastest growth sector on the planet, the only sure growth sector on the planet, and the company with the most advantages. And so I think the company's in great shape. It's just kind of a sad day for Bruce, because you don't get here by working Monday to Thursday.
And of course, kind of begs the question of why you're doing media today and whether Constellation is happy that you're doing media today. Well,
so you were one of my very first interviews, and I was very happy because you were with some other guy named Kevin. And I was terrified of what he might get at, so I wore a 3-piece blue suit and a white shirt, and I think it caused him to scratch his head and wonder why he doesn't look like a hippie, and you asked me a bunch of good questions. The media has been a core tenet of how we've brought both the sector forward and Canopy forward. And the effect of that has been that more people want to own our stock, they want to become our patients, and they want to buy the products. And so I don't think it's appropriate for me to exploit the media on the good days and not support them when they want things on the bad days, because I don't plan to retire today.
What do you plan to do next?
Well, I got a t-shirt on that says Martello, and I've done interviews before. People bug me that I only own Canopy shirts. Martello's a company I'm involved with and have been co-chair of and was CEO of. I'm going to help them out a bit more, and then I'm going to help out another software company called Ruckify that I've helped create. And I'll probably get involved with some cannabis companies that I can support in other jurisdictions, not Canada. I'm not permitted nor interested to participate in Canada.
One of the things that you commented on this in the most recent quarter was the margins and concern about how they were more compressed than expected and where they would go. Are you of the view that if all things stay the same, that was the trough, that was the bottom, and it's only up from here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you just put it on a little time horizon, in Q3 2018, our margins running a 600,000 square foot facility were more than 50% gross margin. But we knew that we needed to have a much larger platform. So what you do is you multiply by 8 the size of the platform. So you become really a substantial platform. When you do that, you have to both spend capital, and then you end up with these assets that aren't fully utilized because you can't just turn them on overnight. And so the margins, gross margins, fall down, but they hit a bottom. And the bottom of that trough was within 1% of our internal model for what we expected. And then we expect them to go forward to begin to climb again because you utilize the asset more fully, which means you're not having burden without income. And so anybody sold at the low margins actually shouldn't have read the headline, they should have read the content of it, which is Canopy's built this terrific capacity, has all of these interesting products ready for December this year. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to have like a little bit of product, you want to have a dominant market share that you can sustain, and I think we've done the preparatory work for that.
Are you worried that Constellation will install a new CEO, but the assumption is that Mark won't stay and that the direction will change materially, that they'll focus more on the short term?
I can't be worried about things like that. I think that whoever they hire as a CEO is going to be a strong player, and probably because they're selected by the board, they'll be able to actually take the time to understand where we are and present it, and I think there'll be some balance. Like I'm probably too much long-term and they would, like a different balance. So the effect will be, I think, a new CEO as a fresh start. And I'm not actually that worried about that.
So if this conversation really only started yesterday, you must have been blindsided by it. What reasons are they giving? What reasons did they give that this should happen so abruptly?
Well, you don't really need to give reasons, right? The board can simply say we want to do something different, and as an adult entrepreneur, you say, okay, that's your choice, and then you work through the terms. I would say when they call, our board meeting was supposed to be today, and it got moved forward by a day and became in person. That was Friday afternoon. Those are kind of indicators, but we've had a couple of those, so it was more just a function of, okay, let's sit down and get this done.
You sound remarkably unbitter about all of this. Do you think that may change over time?
I'm not really bitter, I'm sad. And I would say that there's a big difference. Like, I'm very happy with what we've created. I'm very happy with the team we brought together. I'm very happy with how we've evolved this. I'm sad that I don't get to actually continue to lead it, but I can't say that I'm bitter. I think when you write a really big check, which was very bold, like to write a $5 billion check for 17% of the company is an incredibly bold move. I think they've earned the right and deserve the right to have more decisive input as to how it's run. And sometimes that's more easily achieved through the next person rather than the first person.
You are seen, of course, as an early visionary in the whole space. Are there particular names that you said you won't be involved in Canadian cannabis companies, but are those that you want to invest in that you like?
Well, I don't know. That'd be the smartest thing. I said yes and gave you the names, but I do think in Canada, and I'm no longer involved with it, I do think Canopy Rivers is a very smart thing in that it's a portfolio, and I don't believe it's well understood that it essentially gives whoever invests in Rivers exposure to more than a dozen diversified companies. So I like that. In the US, obviously I quite like Acreage because we did a transaction where in the future we'll have the right to acquire them. Mm-hmm. I think they've really got a good thing going there. But globally, I don't know if I have time. I suspect if I wanted to be chairman of a variety of or co-CEO of a variety of companies around the globe, there's a bunch looking. I don't think I do, but this is no longer a Canadian thing, and the government really does need to make sure they don't take their eye off the ball. If they keep pushing, this could be the best new business outcome of Canada in the last 20 years, but they do need to really push globally to make sure people understand how well it's governed in Canada.
What do you think they should be doing that they're not doing?
Well, I don't know, I raised last year, about $5.5, almost $6 billion of foreign direct investment. I'm still waiting for the first email or call from anybody at any senior level of government to say, how did you do that? If you look at the number of jobs created by Canopy in the last 12 or 14 months, it's more than Google, Amazon, and McCain combined. If you look at the capital investment, it's almost $1 billion of capital investment in Canada. That's more than almost any other company that exists. And so they should recognize this is actually the strongest piece of growth in the entire Canadian economy. and they should reflect that globally through their ambassadors, trade commissioners, high commissioners. They should be inviting everybody on the planet who's a regulator to come here and see how it is, because this is really a material piece of business that's still sometimes introduced with a joke, and that's not appropriate.
All right, and Bruce, finally I want to ask you, you obviously still own a lot of stock. What's your idea about how long you hold on to that?
Well, I think it's going to be worth multiples when the U.S. transforms into a more regulated market, and I think that's going to happen in the context of the 2020 election. So I'm looking forward to seeing the yield on the structures that we put in place for that. And then, obviously, either the Democrats and or the Republicans are going to promise some kind of combination of governance, because more Americans pull more positively towards regulating recreational and medical cannabis than Canadians. And so it's not about what people are in favor of who want to get elected. They want to get elected. It's clear. So I think my stock will be worth a lot more when those events begin to unfold, and I'd like to see it through to there at a minimum.